Hey then, welcome to After Work. My name is Valentine, and in this channel we talk about various data science topics that are important when you're starting out your data science career. If such topics interest you, be sure to subscribe to this channel. So today we're going to be talking about becoming an educational data scientist, and we are going to cover a few key areas. We'll cover types of questions that such data scientists might tackle, areas of application within the industry with regards to the different types of projects that an educational data scientist would normally work on. In terms of also skills, we will talk about skills required, as well as some roles that you might undertake if you are to become a data scientist within the educational industry. We'll also provide a few resources at the very end that would come in handy if you would want to do a bit of more research and digging that we may not have covered in this particular video. Right, so let's get started. So as an educational data scientist, you might work on a variety of different kinds of business problems or organizational problems pertaining to data science. One type of question that a data scientist, an educational data scientist might answer would be, what areas in a curriculum do students struggle with? So in this regard, educational data scientists would analyze how students are performing within a particular program, and they would try to identify poorly performing learning objectives as well as the best performing learning objectives. When it comes to identifying these, how these learning objectives are performing, they would look at assessment data. This is data that would have been collected during the program, the administering of the program, and that data might involve what is referred to as formative data. Could be quizzes which have been done in between the program, or it could be summative data pertaining to assessments which are done at the very end of the program. And summative data could be like exam data or projects data. Once a data scientist is able to identify poorly performed learning objectives based on, say, grading data at the end of the program, then they can be able to provide recommendations. Like, for example, they would say that there's a need for enhancing the delivery learning methods. Possibly, rather than using lecture-based methods, they could use a bit of more discussions. They could use experiential learning techniques within the program. They could use self-paced learning techniques within the program, or even they could also provide other recommendations, such as providing, assisting, or supporting material to already existing material for the poorly performing learning objectives, or even to provide more elaborate explanations to possibly content which still relates to the poorly performing learning objectives. So that's with regards to the curriculum, and on answering that question on what areas in the curriculum do students struggle with. Another type of question that educational data scientists might tackle would be related to understanding learners' performance. So looking at best performing students and poorly performing students, and trying to learn what are these best performing students doing in order to achieve the learning objectives of the program that can be used in coming up with solutions for poorly performing students, or students which are normally referred to as at-risk students. So once the poorly performing students have been identified, other recommendations that could go towards this end would be to possibly administer, say, something like remedial support, where students would have weekly catch-up sessions with, say, instructors who would provide additional support with regards to maybe areas of the curriculum where they're struggling with, etc. So that's a second type of question where the educational data scientist would help in understanding learners' performance in the program. The third area with regards to different kinds of questions that educational data scientists would answer would be in monitoring learners' habits. And this could be understanding learners' engagement with the content to see what areas are students struggling with, mostly in the content. And this might involve especially if the product or the educational product is more self-paced and there isn't so much of instructor intervention. So educational data scientists would come in handy in identifying those key moments within the learning journey where students tend to struggle with regards to the content. And that still could be as a result of them doing an analysis on the assessment data. They could realize that for some of the formative assessments, maybe for some of the quizzes that have been administered in the program, students tend to perform poorly. Then, as a recommendation, are we able to provide, again, additional learning support or additional content or elaborate explanations for the particular areas that students are struggling with? They could also, study something like correlations between different kinds of data. Maybe whether there's a correlation between student attendance and these assessment data, summative data, or the exam grade at the very end, or whether there's a correlation between completing homework and also performing well within a particular summative assessment at the very end. All right, so those are just some basic types of questions that you might come across if you work as an educational data scientist. So everything will just revolve around just education, whether it's administering a new educational service or studying data pertaining to education for an institution or an online product, etc. You are likely to come across such kinds of questions. Now we are going to cover the areas of application within this particular sector where data scientists might tend to work in, and the first would be in curriculum design. So a lot of projects that data scientists would undertake would revolve around curriculum design. It might involve in delivery method, identifying which are the most appropriate learning techniques for students. So that would be in the delivery aspect of what is usually referred to as the classroom aspect or the teaching aspect. The other area of application would be in marketing for a particular educational product where you're trying to understand possibly learners' demographics and interaction with various advertisements for particular product, and that would be crucial in ensuring that you still have users who are able to use your product in the near future and are able to provide revenue for an organization. All right, so the third thing that we are meant to cover in this video is skills required in order to become an educational data scientist, and these skills are much more similar to what we have covered in the past. The skills that you're going to learn in this regard would involve you being able to use different kinds of tools. So the first skill would be business understanding. So you would work closely with educational experts to define the fundamental problem at hand. The second skill would be data collection and exploration. So you would be required as an educational data scientist to work with different kinds of learning management systems, whether it's Moodle or Blackboard or Canvas or Google Classroom, or even any sort of custom learning management system. You might be required to also just learn and how to work with how you're able to pull data from those particular learning management systems. The other skill would be data analysis and visualization. So being able to work with spreadsheets, Tableau, Power BI, or even Python or R for handling some of those tasks that may not easily be handled through the use of some of the mentioned tools like spreadsheet software or Power BI. For answering predictive analytics questions, you would also be required to learn data modeling And lastly, with regards to presenting your insight, you would need to learn how to present your findings or your recommendations as well in a report form, which might involve working with something like Microsoft Word or Google Docs or Google Slides, etc., or even PowerPoint presentation in that regard. All right, so that's it with regards to the skills required. When it comes to the roles that you might end up undertaking if you choose to become an education or data scientist, there are quite a number of them. Different organizations usually term data scientists within the organizations differently. In one organization, you might end up working as a machine learning researcher. That is, if you're going to be working a lot with questions of predictive analytics in nature, where you're creating machine learning models. Or you might end up becoming a data scientist, looking at the data that you have at hand and working on a variety of different kinds of problems. Or you might end up becoming a data science researcher or an associate data scientist or a senior data analyst. So those are just some of the roles that you might undertake if you choose to become an education or data scientist. All right, so that's it. So that's it with regards to the types of questions, areas of application, skills required, and roles for you to become an education or data scientist. I hope you learned a lot in this video. We've also provided some additional resources that might come in handy in your research, so you can have a look at the description section for that. And yeah, if you did like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up so that YouTube can recommend it to others like you who might be also interested in the topic. And if you'd want to be informed of such future videos, be sure to subscribe.